Hello and welcome to Flycatcher Costumes, where I'll be documenting my journey as a small business owner, have some prototypes, and probably some personal projects too to share with you all, and just have some fun and whimsy in this world. Today, I'm going to be making a giant wizard hat as a decent start to my already pretty fantasy wardrobe here. It has a lot of ups and downs, especially as intended, a prototype for my upcoming shop this January. And trust me, it was both a lot easier and a lot harder than it initially seemed to be. So, let's get on with it. So, I want to start off with the fact that I'm not going to go the route of the witch. Now, the appeal of witchcraft and all the cool hats with the unique shapes and the crystals and the ribbons, I'm not going to say it has never caught my eye. Because it definitely, most definitely has before. I think I still have a crocheted blue wizard hat somewhere in my childhood bedroom. Which kind of sucks for me that I'm not going for that, since cutesy autumn fall witch would definitely fit my palette. And since I keep prototypes, it's definitely something that I would have been able to wear from time to time. For those who don't know me, by the way, I dress almost exclusively in green, brown, white, and sometimes yellow. Occasionally you see me have black unless it's a tech week. So, very Hobbit tone. If you know what Gremlin Core is, that was my main thing in high school. But no, what I wanted was one of those impossibly big, iconic wizard hats. Like you see with Gandalf and the Schmendrick from the Last Unicorn. He has a hat. Does it have a brim? Like in Spiritfarer. That kind of big. I didn't really want Witch in the Woods with tea and a cat. I respect all y'all. Respect to you all. Again, I was once in your place. Please don't come at me. But what I wanted was Wizard in the Tower who ponders the orb and throws spells willy-nilly. Onto the pattern. I have a little experience in crochet, which means I've had some practice knowing what shapes make what. I've found crochet to be very geometrical in that sense. So, with a wizard hat, it's very, very simple. It is a cone and a circle. That is it. Technically, it's not a true circle. You need to have an inner circle so that your head can fit through, thus making it a ring. Still the same concept though, right? Now this is a lot easier to do in crochet since it builds upon itself. When I made my first hat as a witch, I started at the very top, spiraled around down the cone, and then I just kept going, increasing stitches to build up that brim. I'm going to be sewing this time though, which means I can't just one piece wonder it. I'm going to need to actually pattern this and pattern a ring. Where is my prop? Thank goodness I'm a costume design major. So at the time of posting this, I am currently taking a class that is all about making patterns by either draping them on a mannequin or the very classic pencil to paper, some rulers, and some math. And for an assignment, we had to create a circle skirt pattern, which looks a lot like a ring. So, using my slanted circumference, which is the measurement from your forehead to your nape, aka where your head meets your neck, I used all the little formulas and steps to create a little brim that I don't have with me right now because I put it down about 2 weeks ago and I forgot where. But other than that, I was able to find the original cone bit, since I wanted to divide it into 4 to match with the circle area, the brim. I divided that number by my slanted circumference by 4. It's very easy since it was just 24, so this is just a simple 6 inches long. Now it's supposed to be a plain triangle, but one thing I've learned in crochet is that I needed this little rectangle area right here, because otherwise, if I missed my slanted circumference enough and I put that hat on my head, sometimes you might get a bump. Or in this case, since I'm using fabric instead of yarn, it's going to be tight. And that is not going to be pleasant after a while. So, there's our pattern. Earlier I had talked about how I wanted to find a fabric that both would match the vibe that I wanted, and would be something I actually would be able to wear from time to time. Because one of the things I really don't like is when people buy a whole bunch of clothes, or they make a whole bunch of clothes, and then they never wear them or forget they exist entirely. Which, I'm a bit guilty of this, but I'm trying to get better. Then I found this lovely, lovely red fabric in my stash. It has a bit of a floral design to it, but I think that it's subtle enough that if seen from further away, it's not going to matter much, and it's going to give me a lot of nice texture, which I really, really like. As for the color, red, I think, to me at least, seems to toe the line between jewel tones and earth tones. So I thought it would be a pretty good enough choice between colorful, eccentric, my dad has money, Howl's Moving Castle-esque wizard, and forest government. So I paired it with a matching velvet. Also, from my stash, I have a big stash of fabric. And this one, we'll get to that later. I went to my campus costume shop and used the really, really nice tables to lay my pattern down and get the tracing and cutting. And cutting. And more cutting. I had to cut each piece about 8 times, and while that's not bad, especially since they're really simple shapes, I'm actually paying attention to stuff like the grain line and fabric conservation, unlike I had before. Since at the end of the day, this is still a prototype to learn from, and I'll need to copy the parts that went well, so I can do it again. Fun fact, I originally wanted this project to be a quick 60-second how I made this wizard hat TikTok, or video for Insta, Facebook, all them. But this hat gave me a lot of challenges, to the point that I had so much footage I couldn't even really cram it into a 2 or 3 minute video. So since I started filming stuff in vertical, to the point that I can't really film that stuff again without technically prototyping again, I decided to keep all of the making of the hat footage vertical, while little asides and bits like this will stay horizontal. Now that I've got all my pieces in place, it's time to put it together. Instead of sewing all the tops together and then all of the brims together, I wanted to line up as many seams as I could, because that's nice and pretty. So I chose to put one brim piece and one hat piece together. Rinse and repeat till all pieces are done. Here you see me not taking out the pins as I work. Don't do that. Had to go slow since I didn't want to break a needle on the pin. I probably lost more time slowing down than just taking out pins as usual. You also see me pulling on the velvet to finagle it to wherever I wanted it to go. Oh, what a mistake that was. Then I did the same, sewing for the main fabric till all the tops were sewn to bottoms. Now we sew the main pieces to the other main pieces. Here you see me struggling to pin this together, since I didn't have any filming equipment other than my phone in my hand at this time. So I had to do everything one-handed, as well as look through the camera to ensure that you could actually see me working. I assure you this went much faster as soon as I got my footage and could put the phone down and get to work. It was a bit hard trying to sew these pieces together and film at the same time, because the fabric was constantly trying to move around and misbehave, so I had to prop the camera against... I don't know what I used. I used something, probably spools of thread, so that I could use both of my hands to keep it straight. Those 4 pieces made 2 halves, and so putting the halves into a hole was pretty straightforward. Again, don't do what I did. Take your pins out. Take your pins out. I didn't break a needle making this, thank goodness, but I did have some close calls. Take your pins out. Clip the points to make it easier to turn out later. Press the seams to be flat and beautiful. Turn the seams to the inside, and we have this. It's a hat, alright. I'd gotten pretty disappointed with how it looked, which is on me. I use the flowy fabric, cut the brim on the bias, which makes it hang flowy, and then get upset when it's flowy to the point I can't see anything. Here you see I couldn't even tell that the point was pointing the wrong way till I lifted up that brim. But I know this can be fixed, so I go ahead and sew the lining pieces together. Look at how beautifully those seams line up. Don't look at that one. But even with hiccups, I still try my best with these fabrics, which, fun fact, I've never used before. When I say this project was a test and an experimental prototype, I meant it. So, here's the problem with this sort of velvet. It's not too obvious on camera, but it does have a good amount of stretch to it. Not too much, but enough for a problem when it comes to machine sewing. Now, you typically have feed dogs, which are these little tracks underneath your presser foot. And with stretchy fabrics, it doesn't like to catch on as quickly, especially if you're pairing it with a non-stretchy fabric. So, when you pull on your top fabric to help guide it a little bit, not like yanking it, but moving it around as you need, especially since with the brim it is a rounded edge, you can end up causing a little bit of a pucker when you get to a pin. And you don't want a pucker, because puckers are kind of ugly. So you pull out the pin and you pull on your fabric a little bit more to get it to where you need to be. And suddenly when you get to the edge of your piece, you have about an inch that you missed. Fun. This is sort of remedied with one of two ways. One, I have to find a non-stretchy velvet, preferably in this color, because I do want to keep using that red floral again for the shop. Or, I just get better with starch fabrics. It's going to take time. Hopefully it'll save me money. After sewing all the lining pieces together, I couldn't just have this floppy mess. Wizards may have magic to keep their brims in shape, but I have the magic of fusible interfacing. This is a sort of fabric with a bunch of plastic dots that, when heated with an iron, stick to the fabric. It's like a glue, and that extra layer can help to stiffen up a fabric, which is what I needed if I want this brim to stand up like I want it to. I even cut this extra piece out for a second layer of interfacing, and I actually like this shape a lot. Maybe after a while of normal circular brims, I might branch out with a shape like this. It's like a star or a petal, and I technically have the pattern for it anyways, so I fused the fusing to the main fabric, which I still don't trust the stretchy fabrics, all around the brim. I pinned the lining to it so we have that added layer for some thickness, and I definitely see improvement. Still not at the level I wanted, and I still couldn't really see much of anything, but it's better. It is better. By the way, I didn't have any help on this project, and so working with no millinery experience whatsoever for the past 2 days and only having what I deemed as failure so far, I took a break. Plus, I had assignments and homework to do anyways. Then, I finally asked my draping teacher what I should do about the shape. She's been in costume technology for a very long time. We love you. I know I don't pay attention in your class. Love you. So, she recommended that I spoke it with wire, which is basically just taking wire around the edge to help sturdy it up, since wire is a lot sturdier than fabric. So I got some wire. It's not millinery wire. I thought I could do pretty well with floral wire that was twisted around itself to make it thicker. And I could get it easier and cheaper than millinery wire. I also took so much of a break on this project that I not only had time to buy wire online and have it shipped here, but also get a cheap tripod so I can finally use both of my hands. Both of them. Oh, and I also took part as stage crew for a musical production my school did for 2 weeks worth of tech week. It was cool. I ate a lot of pie scraps. I did a lot of dishes. Not saying which musical since I love y'all, but I'm not telling y'all where I go to school. But if you know musicals than I did at the time, you might be able to figure out at least which musical it was. With the wire now in hand, I cut a length of about 5 feet, since that's what I measured around the brim, and cut another so I could twist them together. This turned out to not be long enough, so I cut up another, I believe, 1.5 feet twice over to add some length. Here, I pin it to about where I wanted the wire to sit, with some pins before it got sewn. This also lets me reshape the wire to how I need it. To sew it down, I did it by hand with, I think this is quadruple thread, to the lining, since the thicker the material, the thicker your thread. And instead of waiting another 1.5 weeks to get any progress done by buying button thread, I chose to just do standard thread, but more of it. This took a while, a good 2 to 3 hours at least, since I also wanted to keep as consistent as possible, so any visible stitches would look decent from the other side. I wasn't sure how much seam allowance I would give myself to avoid hitting that wire, so I went with an allowance of about 1.5 inches. Very generous, but again, I am not going to be responsible for a broken needle. After taking it to the shop to sew the main fabric to the lining, I wanted to do one last test try-on. This is during said tech week, by the way. I didn't have much time till I was called to help set up props. And, ooh, that shape was exactly what I needed. I didn't take much longer sewing up the 2 pieces of the hat together. I'd gotten the win I needed. And I only had one mess up at this point, which was simply me running out of bobbin thread. That was fixed real quick. I turned the inside of the hat out so all those seams were nice and hidden, and now I just needed to close it up. I was again scared of the needle possibly breaking, especially since the wire was inside and thus no longer visible. But I wanted a nice, clean edge stitch I can use to also hide the opening from where I turned it. So, I picked up my hand sewing needles again, and with a thinner amount of thread this time, whip stitched around the brim once more. This also took a while since I had to constantly stop and start and stop and start again, due to the length of thread compared to the length of the brim. I kept things as consistent as I could during this step by scaling the stitches to the width of my finger. If I could reasonably trap my finger in it, it was the right length of stitch. And after what seemed like forever once more, I finished it up. Finally. So, now that it's finally done, let's see what it looks like, shall we? This project really was an experiment with only a little bit of an idea of what I was getting myself into, but I learned a lot about this. Here's some things I would change before I launch this hat into my shop, which again will be starting January 31st, 2024. First, the fabric issue. Thankfully, I have some velvets that aren't too stretchy, which will be very nice to work with, but unless I want to buy entirely new red velvet, which can get expensive quick, I'm just going to continue using what I have until I run out. That's when I will decide if I want to keep using slightly stretchy velvet or to use something else. Sustainability. Second, the wire. This gave me a lot of trouble. It's probably most of the problems, but it's so integral to getting that shape I want. So I'm probably just going to switch out the interfacing for a plain fabric, maybe a fleece or canvas, something nice and thick, and sew the wire onto that. Additionally, I'm going to have another piece of wire, so there are 3 total, and braid it all together. That way, it'll keep away all those scary bumps that I had to deal with, and That will let me keep it closer to the seam allowance. Hopefully, I will be able to keep my edges nice and straight by machine stitching right under there. And I won't need to break needles. That way I don't have to worry about as much bubbling as the whip stitch edge gave me. Thank you so much for watching. This video took a lot of time and a lot of effort to make, as well as this is my first YouTube video. That's why my set is constantly inconsistent, because this is all on a tablecloth. I'm not even sitting in a chair. I'm sitting on the floor trying to make this work. So if you want to join me in my adventure starting a small business in, I believe, only 2 months from posting this video, as well as seeing more of my work, seeing what I make next, you can always subscribe. Comments will also really help a lot, because not only will that let the algorithm know that you like this stuff and not only push more of it to you, but push my video to more people who are into this stuff. It keeps falling. Next thing to fix. I can also see what you all think of what I make. See if there's anything else you'd like to change about this, anything else you'd like to see. Or maybe certain products or projects that I might try in the future. Again, thank you all. See you later with some more fantasy small business content. Down to fly. Hello and welcome. Well, not technically just any circle. It has to be a ring so that your head can go. I'm sounding like a nerd. It's for a whimsy. It's for a whimsy.
Did you stop recording?
I'm pathetic. I know I'm pathetic.
I couldn't do it.
And editing whatever you don't want me to have.
I'm just fucking you at this point.